thank you so much, Jesse, again for joining us. We are just under 24 hours removed from the debate last night that was held by Milford TV. We were able to stream it. It was a very cool collaboration that Milford TV was able to do with across the 4th District, being able to connect with a bunch of access stations. We were lucky enough to be one of them. And great debate last night.
Yeah, it was great. And I want to say thank you so much for being a part of it. You know, we have seen so many incredible organizations really coming up with creative solutions during this very strange time to be campaigning so that voters have a chance to kick the tires on all of us. You know, it's such an important service. Voters should know, you know, who they're choosing between in this important election on September 1st. So, you know, you guys and the other stations, but leagues of women voters around the district, I mean, everyone's really stepping up and it's much appreciated.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about being a candidate, what it's like to run, what it's like to go through a whole debate process. I think that there's a lot of people that, you know, you see someone running for an office. I mean, I get to see it because I'm coordinating with you a lot, but the scheduling, the amount of information you need to know, the amount of people you need to know, it's a crazy workload. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about it.
It's nonstop. I mean, right before you and I hopped on this, I was in a dress rehearsal for another Zoom. This one's a forum, not a full debate, that's happening in a few days. And so we needed to practice some stuff with them because they have some, you know, intricate pieces of their operation we needed to know about. If you could see my computer right now, the ring around my computer is 10 different Post-it notes with, you know, not necessarily for our conversation because ours is a little more straightforward, but for previous things I've done during the day where it's, okay, make sure you know this person's name. And, you know, a reminder that your first answer, you only have 90 seconds. Then your second answer, you have 60 seconds. You just can't possibly remember all of it. So I have, it's like a lion's mane of yellow Post-it notes all around my computer screen. And it's tough. I mean, in a normal debate situation last night, I would have been able to gauge audience reaction, right? I'd throw out a line and we'd see if, you know, sort of people were grimacing and they didn't like it, or there was applause because it was really resonating. Now you're just, you know, staring at that green dot at the top of your computer and hoping that people on the other side are picking up what you're putting down. So it's a very, very strange dynamic. And you're right, the mechanics behind the scenes are so much more complicated. I feel like we're synchronized swimmers sometimes, right? Like we're trying to make it look beautiful and calm and very easy above the surface, and beneath the surface it's just a mad scramble.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when is it for me? I feel like I've had some good ideas in the past. I think some of the people I've talked to have good ideas, and you know, everyone has sat there and stood around the water bubbler and came up with how to solve the world type conversations. But when do you sit there and say, you know what, it's time for me to run for office? It's time for me to actually do it. When do you do that? Because I feel like it takes an incredible amount of confidence. It takes the fact that your idea is actually a good one and that you have people that believe in you. And I would imagine it takes a little bit of ego to be like, yeah, I am the right person for that job. So what was that like? What was that process?
You know, a friend of mine has deemed this brazy, a combination of brave and crazy. And on most days, that feels like the right way to describe it. The balance of brave and crazy shifts every day, depending on what's going on. I'll get to my decision-making process in a second, but I want to push back on you on one thing. It's not that I have the ideas and the solutions for everything, right? I have a lot of ideas and a lot of things that I want to tackle that I've come up with in my own noggin, but there's no way that I'm going to have all the ideas for all of the issues, right? So it's also about understanding the importance of and being willing to, and not having the ego that you can't put aside to collaborate with other people and to acknowledge that it is impossible to accomplish anything alone, no matter what the title before or after your name is. And so, yes, I have a lot of ideas and I'm excited about them, but this is about doing things with the people of the 4th Congressional District. And, you know, for me, making the decision to do this was first rooted in issues. I mean, I was in a great job where I thought I was making a big difference. I was running the Alliance for Business Leadership, the socially responsible business organization in Massachusetts. And we were fighting for, paid family and medical leave and earned sick time and raising the minimum wage and raising revenue equitably to invest in housing and education and transportation. I wasn't looking for a new gig. And when it became clear that this seat would be open, I started to think, all right, a lot of the stuff that I wish was coming out of Washington is the stuff that I've been working on and that I know a lot about and I've had some success in. And, honestly, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was thinking, and I know this sounds so cheesy, but it really is true, about my grandmother, who's been gone for, it'll be 18 years next month, but she was incredibly civically minded, not political. No one in my family has ever run for office. They don't know, where I came from. But very involved in the community and expected that I would be too, and that I'd be a problem solver. And to me, the way I make decisions is whether or not it would make my grandmother proud, whether or not it would be what she expected me to do. And I think the thing that pushed me over the edge was asking myself that question and knowing that she would expect me to swing at the pitch, right? To show up and try and say, this is my experience, these are my ideas, these are my values. And ask the people of the 4th Congressional District to put their faith in me, particularly during these incredibly important and challenging times.
And Jesse, it's got to be a process of every time you get an interview that's scheduled, every time there's a time for you to talk to people that schedules, I'm sure that it gets a little bit repetitive. Does it get a little repetitive with it's got to be the same questions you're asked and the same, things, and you hear celebrities talk about it a lot. You hear some politicians talking about it, but does it get repetitive day in and day out to be answering the same question?
Well, I'm certainly no celebrity, I can assure you that. But, there are a lot of similarities in the questions, but that's okay. And there should be. That's actually useful for me, right? Voters in Easton need the same information, right? As do voters in Needham or in Dighton. And so having the same conversation over and over again is about providing consistent information to voters across the district. Now, if you're in the Boston Globe or it's your ad on TV, you're talking to a wider audience. But, I get it. It makes sense. And it is ultimately in my best interest to have these conversations over and over again. But yeah, there are a few stories I've told more than once at this stage of the campaign.
Absolutely. I think we've all been there. There's your favorite story to go back to, right?
Whether you're campaigning or just with friends at a bar, right? We've all got our go-to stories. It's no different.
Yeah, exactly. Now, debates are an interesting thing. I think that it's not only are they the tough questions that you're going to get asked, but also oftentimes you don't know the questions that are going to be asked. They're going to be a wide range all over the place. It's going to be you're answering the question, then you're also responding to answers to the question. You're, in the debate, I think that we watched almost 2 completely different debates last night. There was the first half and the second half, and both of those took 2 totally different, directions, it seemed like. And we'll get into that in a second. But what's the preparation like for a debate? Because I feel like it's just, how do you look at the landscape and say, I'm going to have to answer all these different kinds of questions and I have no idea what's going to come at me. So what's the preparation like?
For me, it's 2 different buckets, right? There's the issues piece, which, I think is the most important because I'm a policy nerd and I care a lot about that stuff. And trying to think through, okay, these are the 10 or 12 buckets of issues. You've got a finite period of time and it's going to take X number of minutes to get through each topic. So 10 or 12 buckets of issues that we think will come up. These are the most predictable questions within those buckets. At this stage of the campaign, now 9-10 months in, I'm pretty familiar with what those questions might be, and I've really thought through my policy positions on most of them. But you go through and you think through those answers. You think about what the local angles might be, either for your answers or for what the questions could be. A question about transportation, which unfortunately isn't something we really talked about last night, but in a debate hosted by Milford is going to be really different than one in Brookline, right? And so you think about it through that lens. And then I have a fantastic team that works with me on the logistics side of things. Sometimes going so far as to portray other candidates in the race and do mock debates. I can assure you we have great fun, all respectful fun doing that, and just anticipating, particularly when it's a debate, not a forum where we can have that interaction, anticipating what someone else might do or an angle that they might take. You can't anticipate every scenario, of course, but the more practice, at least for me, that I get in hypothetical situations, the more comfortable I feel going in on debate day.
Yeah, I certainly encourage the residents of Medfield to go back and kind of take a look at the debate that happened last night. It was awesome to watch. Like I said, it was almost like two different debates went on. It was the first debate seemed like no one was really talking about each other all that much. And I think you can kind of see where this question's going to go. But no one was really talking about each other all that much. No one had a whole lot to say about others' policies. They were really just talking about themselves. And then the second half of the debate came. And Jesse, I think if I remember correctly, you were the first one to kind of talk about another candidate. You can go into it a little bit, but what was that decision process like? Because it is an interesting one to say, you know what, it's not enough that I talk about myself. It was also something that, you know, people should know what's going on with other candidates. What's that decision like for you? What was that going into it?
Well, first and foremost, I want voters to know about me and what I stand for and my experience. And, you know, I had the chance to do that in an opening statement. I knew I'd have multiple chances to articulate that. And have also, you know, been on community television in most of these communities, you know, and talking about my background. There are real differences in this race. And with, you know, 4.5 weeks left to go, and voters understandably focused on so many other issues between COVID and, you know, the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and wondering what's happening with schools. We can go on down the list. Folks haven't had a chance to focus on this race. And I think it's important that we start drawing distinctions amongst the candidate. And so I did ask a question of someone else in the race to, not an attack, just asking for an explanation of some positions and actions from their very recent past around opposing raising the minimum wage and supporting an anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ plus politician in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, that person never answered the question and instead chose to, I think, take it to a pretty dismissive and inappropriate place. But I think it was a fair question. And it's not something that I do lightly. It takes time away from my ability to talk about my own record. But I do think these distinctions are so important. Not personal attacks, not anything hateful or vitriolic, but talking about issues differences, I think is relevant.
Absolutely. And like I said, I didn't think that it was a personal attack. I didn't think it was something like that, but just the option to, and like you said, it takes away from you being able to talk about yourself. So there is a conscious decision, like you said, the live debates that you're doing, the practice debates that you're doing, there's a decision to say, hey, this is going to be the time that I'm going to bring up someone else's policies or someone else's topics. Now, once that did happen, it then turned back to you. And I think that this is an interesting moment is once it did turn back to you to kind of sit back and you stayed very calm, very collected, and was able to respond back. And that takes a lot to be able to do that. I think that that's a very difficult thing to kind of have someone like shoot back at you and not to want to jump across the screen at them, right? So what was that? What's that like to have someone say something like that to you?
You know, it's not the most fun thing. You know, I think for me, the hardest part was having my own professional experience and heft dismissed, right? Asking a substantive policy question that's incredibly relevant to the voters of the district and having an opponent, a male opponent, come back and tell me that I was simply a good tweeter and that I haven't been walking the walk and doing the policy work when I've multiple times been a local elected official, a senior staffer to Governor Patrick. I ran external affairs at Planned Parenthood and pounded the pavement in Congress fighting for reproductive justice. I literally negotiated the paid family and medical leave law here in Massachusetts, the strongest paid leave law in the country. I mean, we can go on down the list. And the reason I fought so hard to respond in a calm but clear way was because I refused to be dismissed. I refused to have my professional record demeaned in that way. And unfortunately still never got an answer on the policy question, but it's 2020 and I'm gonna stand up for myself. I'm gonna do it in a calm and respectful way. I'm not gonna get nasty about it, but I am gonna stand my ground and make sure that I'm respected as a professional, who, by the way, does also send some pretty good tweets.
So one of the things that we saw was that you responded back on your website. You posted a statement afterwards. And when I first heard about the statement, I kind of said, here we go. It's going to be an apology about saying something about another candidate, but you didn't. Instead, you doubled down. You backed up what you said. You actually, I thought it was really good. You took the moment and you clipped it out. You put it on your page. You used that. It's different, I think, than what most people expect out of a politician, because I think a lot of the times when something does get stated, they try to backtrack and, roll it back or like apologize or move on. But instead, you made the choice that this morning you backed it up. You said, I said it, I stand by it today. And then you backed it up with the clip. And so again, like, people from Medfield can go to jessemermell.com and check out the clip and actually see exactly what was said.
Yeah, and I hope that people from Medfield will do that. Quite frankly, I have the receipts, and there's never a reason to apologize for asking policy questions, which is exactly what I did, or questions about the support that someone has given to, quite frankly, a very troubling political figure in Massachusetts. And I'm always going to demand respect for myself, for other women, and for other people, period. 2 or 3 days ago, Becky Grossman, who is an opponent of mine in this race, had some really horrible comments posted on her Facebook page about being a mother and running for office at the same time. Becky's a fantastic mom. She has 2 young kids, and some inappropriate comments were left on her Facebook page. And I don't care that she's my opponent. I'm never going to stand by and let that happen. And so I jumped in on her Twitter feed and I said, I couldn't care less that we're running in the same race. This is, misogyny and sexism. We won't stand for it. Don't let it get you down. And I was glad that the rest of the field joined me in having her back. But I'll stand up for anyone, anytime. I don't care if you're an opponent. I'll certainly stand up for myself. And so we wanted to show everyone exactly what happened last night and make clear that I'm never going to stand for sexism and I'm going to fight back.
Now, shifting gears a little bit, this whole process, obviously you still have you still have a while to go in this process. This isn't
it's going to go like that, right?
I know, right? At least we all hope it will. What is some of your favorite parts of running for office right now? What are some of your least favorite parts? What are some of the things that kind of brought you out of your comfort zone? What do you have going on for this?
So this will sound very strange as someone who's running for office, but I'm quite shy. I am happy to talk about policy all day. I'm happy to, reveal certain things about myself with my dog or my love of Judy Garland, but I'm ultimately very, very private. And so the biggest thing that's gotten me out of my comfort zone is knowing that at any time someone could ask me a question that I'm just really uncomfortable with from a personal standpoint. I released my tax returns. I released 6 years of my tax returns, not anything we're required to do. And I can assure you, not the most fun thing to do. A friend of mine described it to me as standing naked on Twitter, but it was the right thing to do in terms of accountability and transparency in a time when Donald Trump is eroding trust in government and lying and cheating his way through his what will only be 4 years in office. And I wanted to run the exact opposite type of campaign that was very much outside of my comfort zone, but important to do. And I have to say, one of the things that I've loved most about campaigning, and unfortunately have missed the most during COVID, is back when I could campaign in person. You show up at an event, you work the room for 5 or 10 minutes before your speaking part starts, or maybe you're chatting with folks afterwards. And I would say 75% of the time, someone pulls you aside and says, hey, Jesse, I want to tell you something I wasn't comfortable sharing with the group. And they tell you about not being able to afford their insulin. Or, a mother in Sharon pulled me aside and talked to me about finding her 19-year-old son dead from an opioid overdose in his childhood bedroom, and the work that she and her daughter had done to help move their family forward coming out of that. You lose that on Zoom. You lose that not being in community with people. And it's truly an honor to have people put their trust in you like that. They aren't telling you that story just for the heck of it. They're telling you those really personal things because they think that you can do something about it. Even if that doing something is just making sure the story is remembered and seen and elevated, and hopefully so far as to finding a policy solution. People don't have those conversations with you, in the chat of Zoom. It just doesn't happen. So I was so honored and so moved by that part of campaigning before COVID, and I miss it a great deal. Obviously, public health has to come first, but it does feel like you're missing part of that connection.
Absolutely. To kind of sum this up, or one of my last things that I want to ask you about, you've now worked with some access stations going forward. I'm sure you have an open invitation to Medfield TV. We would be happy to have you back. But what has your experience been like working with access stations? What do you think of what we're doing? Because a lot of people, I think, are totally misguided. They have no idea what access stations are and what we do. So what do you think about us? What are we doing?
So fun fact, I was the select board representative for then Brookline Access Television, now big, the Brookline Interactive Group, when I was on the select board. So I've actually done a fair amount of work with local cable access television stations. And I also come from a background in radio. My father ran a small local radio station in a little town in Pennsylvania where I grew up. So I couldn't possibly be a bigger supporter of local media, whether it's cable or radio. Listen, this is the way that people know what's going on in their own communities. This is the way that community members have the opportunity to get involved and amplify their own voices by hosting their own shows. This is the way that particularly some younger people learn real skills around radio and television, and then go on to careers in radio, TV, digital, you name it. They are such important community assets. They are particularly vital in these times as we're going through a global pandemic. You're providing genuine public health information that's so essential and needs to be community by community. And what's been remarkable to me, sort of observing the shift in the cable access space over the past 10 or 20 years, is the level of professionalism that I think has really arrived. I mean, if you look at the production value you have in Taunton, they have a remarkable studio. In Brookline, there's a really top shelf facility. This is not Wayne and Garth, right? This is a much, much different type of operation. And you're providing educational opportunities, communication opportunities, and vital services to communities. So I'm a big, big fan. And one day we'll get to do this in person.
Absolutely. Jesse, thank you so much for joining us yet again. I know that this wasn't as policy driven of an interview, but it was more of like, I think that people should know what running for office looks like and what it is. Certainly a great time talking to you again. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Brett, great to see you. Thank you for having me. Stay safe out there.
You too. Absolutely.